The Ukrainian Air Force has detected and targeted a command post of the occupying Russian army near the occupied city of Oleshki in Kherson region. As a result of the strike by a MiG-29 fighter delivered with a US-made GBU-62 aerial bomb, the command post and a nearby ammunition depot, a military truck carrying ammunition to the depot, were blown up, and all Russian servicemen at the command post were killed. It should be noted that the Ukrainian army has recently increased its strikes on the positions of the occupying Russian army, both in the occupied territories and in the border regions of Russia, mainly with US and French-made aerial bombs. As a result, a large number of command posts, ammunition depots, military equipment and personnel have been destroyed.
Russian troops have stepped up their offensive in eastern Ukraine, advancing toward the Donetsk and Luhansk regions and approaching the northern Sumy region. These moves, according to Ukrainian officials and analysts, are aimed at forcing Kiev to disperse its forces and showcase its battlefield successes to the international community, the Washington Post reports. Russian troops have come within 19 kilometers of Sumy, said Igor Shapoval, chairman of the Red Cross in Sumy Oblast. The situation is difficult, but not critical. There is no panic, but anxiety, especially among children, is felt, he noted. According to Deputy Mayor of Sumy, Artem Kuznetsov, the shelling of the city continues. The shelling is continuous. If the front line gets closer by another 10 to 15 kilometers, the artillery will terrorize our city, he warned. Nearby, near the logistically important town of Yonakovka, fierce fighting continues. The situation is very tense. Friends who hold this area say that the enemy is coming wave after wave, as if deliberately trying to exhaust our defense, said a platoon commander under the pseudonym Kast. But here, Russian soldiers are destroyed. But it seems that the Russian generals are not drawing any conclusions from this and are continuing their meat attacks. Analysts are convinced that the attacks in the Sumy region and in the direction of Dnipropetrovsk region are a diversionary tactic. In my view, the Sumy direction is a subsidiary axis for the Russians. The main goal is Donbass. They will not be able to capture Sumy. Rather, they want to exert psychological pressure and sow chaos, says Konrad Muzyka, director of the Polish defense consultancy Rochan. Even if Ukrainian forces manage to hold the city, the consequences of prolonged shelling could be catastrophic. They can turn a city into ruins, destroy the economy, create hell for the civilian population. Their style is to create suffering. They do not know how and do not want to create anything else, warns one European diplomat. Ukrainian troops are gradually pushing Russian forces back in the northeastern Sumy region, President Volodymyr Zelensky said recently. Prior to this, the Ukrainian army had almost completely withdrawn from the parts of the Russian region of Kursk it had been occupying since August last year. Russia then intensified its shelling of Ukrainian border areas, with Ukrainian authorities ordering the evacuation of 11 villages as a result. The Russian authorities have announced the modernization and restoration of shelters and bomb shelters in their country. In annexed Crimea, this issue is relevant given the regular strikes on Russian military facilities on the peninsula. But local officials have already warned there will not be enough shelters for everyone. Explosions and arrivals have been recorded in Crimea since the summer of 2022. They were the result of Russia's full-scale invasion of mainland Ukraine. The Ukrainian armed forces have repeatedly stated that their targets in Crimea are Russian military facilities located on the peninsula. This year, drone attacks on Russian military facilities in Crimea have become more frequent. In annexed Crimea, specialized services have already inspected civil defense sites, but they are not designed for everyone who lives on the peninsula. We have been working on shelters and civil defense facilities since 2022. We have checked these facilities. We have more than 1,000 of them. They are necessary and are used at those facilities where work continues during wartime and which fall under the categorization, said Alexander Zrayenko, deputy head of the Crimean Main Directorate of the Russian Emergencies Ministry, at a briefing in Simferopol. For Crimeans who do not have access to special bomb shelters, authorities recommend seeking shelter in deepened spaces, including basements, in apartment buildings. These shelters are numbered and registered. Our task was to prepare them so that people could go down for a long time when the siren sounds. The task was to clean, prepare, and provide lighting. The Crimean Ministry of Emergency Situations is doing this. The underground premises, that is, basements and so on, are the main protection for citizens. Shelters are not provided for everyone, he said at a press conference in Simferopol in May. There are more than 100,000 underground spaces in Crimea that can be used to shelter civilians. The Russian government's Ministry of Emergency Situations of Crimea reported earlier. Their capacity is more than 2.7 million people, the department claims. We have established contact with all the owners of basements and cellars. Everyone understands that if any situation arises, they must open these premises so that residents can take refuge in them. Of the thousands of houses that we visited, there was not a single private owner who did not confirm their readiness to open the premises. Alexander Semchenko, deputy head of the Russian administration of Simferopol, told journalists. In Crimea, for the first time in the last 32 years, new shelters have been built, designed for the evacuation of the population in the event of any threats, claims the head of the Ministry of Emergency Situations, Alexei Eremenko. In most regions of Crimea, despite regular strikes by Ukrainian armed forces on Russian military facilities, there has been an imperceptible increase in civil protection measures for the population. The most fortified city in Crimea appears to be Sevastopol, where the most active strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces on Russian military facilities are recorded. In connection with these attacks, the Moscow-controlled city authorities began coordinating with the Russian military the process of warning the population about air attacks. Other cities in Crimea refused to install similar shelters. Vladimir Konstantinov, the Speaker of the Russian Parliament of Crimea, explained this by the desire not to make ill-considered decisions that will create nothing but panic. Therefore, Crimeans create their own safety spots. For example, residents of Olenevka in the Chernomorsky district have set up protective structures on the beach using sandbags designed for several people. So, the Russian army left the population defenseless in Crimea, and this led to new protests against the Kremlin.